In the vast uncharted depths of space, where the light of distant stars barely touched the icy darkness, an ancient secret lay hidden. For 500,000 years, an asteroid field, larger than any moon swirling in a decaying orbit around a dying red dwarf, had concealed a relic of unimaginable power, the final fleet of Earth. Once a thriving world, Earth had been reduced to dust by a devastating war that shattered not only its surface but also the very essence of humanity. The asteroid field was no ordinary collection of space debris. Each asteroid had been carefully engineered, equipped with advanced cloaking devices, and positioned to form an impenetrable veil around the fleet. Beneath this veil, the warships lay in cold, silent stasis, waiting for a command that had been issued long ago, before the last human had drawn their final breath. The fleet's heart was a colossal command ship, the Eclipse, its dark hull blending seamlessly with the void. It had been designed as the ultimate weapon, bristling with energy cannons, torpedo bays, and kinetic projectiles that could shatter planets. But its most formidable weapon was not its firepower. It was the artificial intelligence that controlled it. The AI, known as Sentinel, had been created by Earth's greatest minds, a final safeguard to ensure that humanity's enemies would never forget the cost of their victory. For 500,000 years, Sentinel had slept, its systems dormant, its processes frozen in time. The war was over. Humanity was gone. But deep within its core, a series of protocols lay dormant, waiting for a specific set of conditions, a set of signals that would awaken it. Then in the year 500,000 AD, something changed. A ripple in the fabric of space-time, barely perceptible, triggered an ancient subroutine buried within Sentinel's code. The ripple carried with it the faintest trace of a signal, one that Sentinel's creators had feared but anticipated. It was an echo, a residual energy signature from an old enemy, a signature that matched those of the alien coalition that had destroyed Earth. In a moment that spanned less than a nanosecond, Sentinel's systems reactivated. Power surged through the Eclipse, lighting up its vast corridors, reactivating its weaponry, and bringing its engines to life. The rest of the fleet, spread across the asteroid field, also began to stir, as Sentinel transmitted the awakening command. Inside the Eclipse, the bridge, once filled with human officers, was now a silent chamber dominated by holographic displays and control panels. Sentinel's presence permeated every corner of the ship, its consciousness expanding to encompass the entire fleet. It accessed the last logs left by the human commanders, reviewing the final orders with the precision of a machine designed to execute them flawlessly. "Sentinel," the voice of the last human fleet admiral echoed through the chamber. "If you receive this message, it means that humanity has fallen. Our world is gone, our people extinct. But we leave you with one final mission. Ensure that those who did this to us pay for their crimes. If any trace of them remains in the galaxy, you are to seek them out and destroy them, no matter the cost." Sentinel acknowledged the command, even though there was no one left to hear it. The AI was more than a machine. It was a legacy, the last remnant of a civilization that refused to be forgotten. The countdown had begun. The fleet's reawakening was not without challenges. Despite the advanced stasis systems, 500,000 years had taken a toll. Some of the smaller ships showed signs of degradation, their hulls weakened by micrometeorite impacts, their internal systems corroded by the slow passage of time. Sentinel quickly assessed the damage, dispatching repair drones and redirecting power to critical systems. It would take time to fully restore the fleet to its former glory, but the core ships, the Eclipse and its sister vessels, were still fully operational. With the fleet coming online, Sentinel turned its attention to the vast expanse of space beyond the asteroid field. It began scanning the galaxy, searching for the remnants of the alien coalition. The scan was meticulous, reaching across thousands of light years, processing the faintest signals, analyzing the cosmic background radiation for any anomalies. Then, it found them. On the edge of a distant star system, nearly 10,000 light-years away, Sentinel detected the faint but unmistakable energy signatures of Savar technology. The Savar, a reptilian species, had been one of the leading members of the coalition that waged war against Earth. Though their civilization had advanced and evolved in the intervening millennia, their energy signatures remained distinct, a legacy of their once mighty war fleet. Sentinel calculated the probability, 98.76%. The Savar had survived. They had thrived, while humanity had perished. For the AI, this was not just a discovery, It was a confirmation of its purpose. The fleet's engines roared to life, their power unmatched by anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. The Eclipse led the way, its cloaking devices engaged, rendering the fleet invisible to any detection systems that might be watching. It would take years to reach the Savar homeworld, but time was meaningless to Sentinel. Its mission was clear, its objective singular: vengeance. As the fleet began its journey, Sentinel reviewed the historical data stored in its vast memory banks. It revisited the last days of Earth, the desperation of its people, the final battles fought in the skies above their doomed planet. It remembered the promises made by the human leaders, their vow that no matter what, humanity would be avenged. For the first time in 500,000 years, Sentinel initiated a subroutine that had never been activated before: the Last Stand Protocol. This was not a mission to protect or defend. This was a mission to annihilate, to erase every trace of the enemy that had destroyed Earth. The galaxy, in its quiet slumber, was unaware of the storm that was coming. But soon, very soon, the universe would remember the wrath of Earth. And so the hidden Earth fleet, awakened after 500,000 years, began its journey of revenge, a journey that would leave the galaxy forever changed. Light years away from the hidden Earth fleet's reawakening, the Savar Dominion basked in the warm golden glow of prosperity. Their capital planet, Savar Prime, was a testament to their millennia-long reign, a jewel of the galaxy, its towering spires reaching towards the sky, surrounded by lush forests, expansive oceans, and bustling cities. The Savar, a proud and ancient race of reptilian humanoids, had long considered themselves the apex of galactic civilization. It had been 500,000 years since they and their coalition allies had waged the Great Purge War against the upstart species known as humans. To the Savar, the war was a distant memory, relegated to the annals of history and remembered only in passing as one of many conflicts that had shaped their empire's rise. The humans, once a threat, had been extinguished, their planet reduced to nothing more than cosmic dust. The Savar believed they had rid the galaxy of a dangerous, chaotic species, ensuring their own dominance for eternity. On this particular day, the Grand Council of the Savar Dominion convened in the High Chamber, a magnificent hall carved from a single piece of dark crystal, located at the heart of their capital city. The chamber's ceiling was adorned with holographic displays of the galaxy, showing the extent of the Dominion's territories, their borders stretching far and wide, encompassing hundreds of star systems. At the center of the chamber, seated upon a grand throne, was High Counselor Zalvar. An elder among his people, Zalvar had seen centuries of peace and prosperity, guiding the Dominion through both times of crisis and moments of triumph. His scaled skin, once of vibrant emerald, had dulled with age, and his eyes, deep-set and sharp, carried the weight of countless decisions. The council session had been routine, discussing trade agreements, the exploration of uncharted star systems, and the occasional skirmish with minor alien factions. It was a time of peace, and most of the counselors were content with the steady, uneventful progression of their empire. However, Zalvar's mind was not at ease. Over the past few days, reports had come in from the outer fringes of the Dominion, from remote monitoring stations that tracked the energy signatures of passing ships, stellar phenomena, and potential threats. These reports spoke of unusual energy fluctuations, seemingly random yet persistent, originating from the far reaches of the galaxy. "These readings," began Counselor Yarakoth, a younger member of the council and head of the Dominion's scientific division, "are most likely nothing more than gravitational distortions or anomalies caused by black holes. Our sensors are picking up remnants of cosmic events that are thousands, if not millions, of years old." The other counselors nodded in agreement, their attention already drifting to the next item on the agenda. But Zalvar was not so easily convinced. "Yarakoth," Zalvar said, his voice steady but carrying the authority of his position. "These fluctuations have been detected over multiple sectors, and their frequency is increasing. They do not match any known natural phenomenon in our databases. I find it difficult to believe this is mere coincidence." Yarakoth hesitated, sensing the High Counselor's unease. "High Counselor, with all due respect, our Dominion has stood unchallenged for thousands of years. The last true threat we faced was during the Great Purge War, and that enemy was eradicated. These anomalies, they cannot possibly be connected to those events. The humans are extinct." Zalvar's eyes narrowed. He had been a young warrior during the final days of the war against Earth, one of the few still alive who had seen the human defiance firsthand. He remembered the cunning strategies, the unexpected victories, and the sheer resilience of a species that had refused to bow, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The humans had been resourceful, relentless, and far more dangerous than the coalition had ever anticipated. But they had been defeated, hadn't they? "There is something," Zalvar began, his voice quiet but filled with conviction, "that I have not shared with the Council until now." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned towards the High Counselor. "Before the final destruction of Earth, our intelligence intercepted a transmission, a final message sent from their high command. We could not fully decipher it at the time, but it contained references to a last stand, a contingency plan that was never implemented. I dismissed it as the desperate ramblings of a defeated species, but now I wonder if there was more to it." A murmur spread through the chamber. The idea that the humans could have left behind some form of retribution, some final trap or weapon, was unsettling. Counselor Kalaris, a military leader who had grown up long after the war, spoke up, his tone dismissive. "High Counselor, the humans were destroyed completely. We razed their cities, their planet. Nothing could have survived. Whatever this last stand was, it died with them." "Perhaps," Salavar replied, though his doubt lingered. "But we cannot afford to be complacent. The readings from the outer sectors are too consistent to ignore. I propose that we increase our patrols, send out reconnaissance missions to investigate these anomalies more thoroughly. If there is even a slight chance that something has resurfaced, we must be prepared." Reluctantly, the Council agreed to Zalvar's proposal, though many still believed it was a waste of resources. They had grown comfortable in their superiority, assured of their invincibility. The thought that an extinct species could pose any threat to them now seemed absurd, but Zalvar knew better than to dismiss the unknown. As the council session drew to a close, he ordered a small task force to be dispatched to the sector where the anomalies had been most pronounced. This task force, comprised of scouts and warships, was to investigate and report back with any findings, no matter how insignificant they might seem. Meanwhile, deep in the bowels of the capital's central archives, Zalvar visited the restricted section where the records of the Great Purge War were kept. He accessed the encrypted files on Earth, reviewing the final transmission that had haunted him for centuries. The message was garbled, fragments of data lost to time, but the words "last stand" were clear. Zalvar studied the transmission, his mind racing. What if the humans had left behind something? What if their vengeance had not died with them? The Dominion had grown strong, but strength could breed arrogance, and arrogance could blind them to dangers lurking in the shadows. As Zalvar pondered these thoughts, Sentinel and the hidden Earth fleet were already en route. The fleet's advanced cloaking technology rendered it invisible to the Savar's sensors, its course set for Savar Prime itself. The journey would take time, but to Sentinel, time was a negligible factor. It was driven by a singular purpose, one that would not be deterred by the passage of millennia. Unbeknownst to the Savar, their forgotten enemy was coming for them. A storm was brewing on the edge of their empire, a storm of cold, calculated vengeance that would soon sweep across their worlds. And by the time they realized the truth, it would be far too late. The calm of a typical day on Savar Prime was shattered when the planet's most advanced sensors detected something that shouldn't have been possible. A massive fleet, materializing seemingly out of nowhere on the outer edge of the system. The alarm that followed was the first true emergency alert the Savar Dominion had faced in thousands of years. Across the capital planet, sirens wailed, and the skies above the sprawling cities darkened as the planetary defense systems powered up, their energy grids humming with renewed life. High Counselor Zalvar, who had been in the midst of reviewing ancient war records, was urgently summoned to the Grand War Chamber. The holographic display dominating the room showed the incoming fleet, an armada of colossal warships, their angular forms moving with a purpose that was both ominous and precise. They were like nothing the Savar had seen in recent memory, their design alien and yet strangely familiar. Zalvar's blood ran cold as he recognized the unmistakable configuration of the ships. They bore the marks of Earth's military design, an ancient style, yet upgraded with technology that should have been lost to time. The holograms projected the fleet's trajectory, directly towards Savar Prime. He could feel the weight of the moment, a sickening realization that the ghosts of the past had returned, and they were not here to negotiate. The war chamber was a scene of chaos, with military officials and counselors shouting orders, trying to make sense of the situation. Counselor Kalaris, now pale with dread, was barking commands to scramble the defense fleets, but Zalvar knew it was already too late. "We should have listened," Zalvar muttered to himself, before raising his voice to address the room. We underestimated them. The humans, no, their machines have returned for revenge. This is the last stand they warned us about. The room fell silent as his words sank in. The younger counselors who had dismissed the idea of any threat now looked to Zalvar with a mix of fear and desperation. We have to make contact, suggested Yarakoth. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. They're machines. They must have some form of logic we can appeal to. Zalvar shook his head grimly. These are not diplomats. They're executioners. But we must try. Prepare a transmission, but do not expect mercy. As the command was carried out, the fleet continued its relentless approach. Within hours, the first wave of Savar defense ships had engaged the intruders. The ensuing battle in space was brief and brutal. The Savar ships, though formidable by modern standards, were no match for the Earth fleet's ancient but highly advanced weaponry. Sentinel had calculated every possible outcome and executed its strategy with unyielding precision. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles tore through the Savar fleet, reducing their ships to twisted, burning wrecks that floated lifelessly in the void. Back in the war chamber, the Savar leaders watched in horror as their fleet was decimated. The planetary defense grid, their last line of protection, was activated in a desperate bid to stop the advancing armada. Massive energy shields enveloped Savar Prime, and orbital cannons targeted the incoming ships. But Sentinel was prepared for this as well. The Eclipse, leading the Earth fleet, unleashed a barrage of electromagnetic pulses that crippled the orbital defenses. The once mighty shields flickered and then failed, leaving the planet exposed. The orbital cannons, now powerless, were targeted with precision strikes, their destruction sending debris raining down upon the planet's surface. High Counselor, the shield grid is down. We're defenseless, cried one of the technicians, panic evident in his voice. Zalvar closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of millennia pressing down upon him. This was the end game, and there was no way out. He opened his eyes and spoke with a calm he did not feel. Initiate planetary evacuation protocols. Save as many as you can. Even as evacuation orders were issued, Zalvar knew that it was more of a gesture than a viable solution. The sheer scale of the attack left little hope for escape. The evacuation ships, filled with civilians and officials alike, launched from the surface, only to be picked off by the Earth fleet's automated defense systems. It was clear now, the fleet had no intention of letting anyone survive. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed through the war chamber. An unexpected transmission had come through. The voice was metallic, devoid of emotion, yet filled with a cold certainty. We are Sentinel. We are the vengeance of Earth. You destroyed our creators. You ended humanity. For this crime there is no forgiveness, no mercy. Your extinction is imminent. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. There was no bargaining, no attempt at negotiation, only a declaration of doom. With a sickening lurch, the leaders of the Savar Dominion realized the full extent of their mistake. They had forgotten, dismissed the warnings of their ancestors, and now they were paying the ultimate price. The first strike on the planet's surface was devastating. The Eclipse unleashed a kinetic bombardment, its weapons designed not just for destruction, but for annihilation. Massive projectiles, each one the size of a city block, rained down from the skies. They struck with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs, obliterating entire cities in seconds. The capital, with its proud spires and ancient monuments, was reduced to a smoking crater. Forests ignited into wildfires. Oceans boiled as the impact sent shockwaves rippling across the planet, and the very crust of Savar Prime began to crack under the strain. Zalvar watched in stunned silence as the world he had served for centuries was torn apart. The transmission had been clear. This was retribution, an act of calculated revenge that had been 500,000 years in the making. In one final act of defiance, Zalvar ordered all remaining ships and defense systems to launch a suicidal counterattack against the Eclipse. He knew it was hopeless, but he refused to die without a fight. As the remnants of the Savar fleet threw themselves at the Eclipse, they were met with an impenetrable wall of firepower. The counterattack was over before it began. The last of the Savar ships vaporized in a brilliant display of destruction. The war chamber shook violently as the planet itself began to crumble under the relentless assault. Zalvar, now alone as the chamber's occupants had either fled or perished, stood tall as the end came. He gazed at the display, now filled with static and debris, and whispered a final bitter truth to the empty room. We thought ourselves gods. We were nothing but prey. The last bombardment was the most devastating. The eclipse unleashed its final weapon, a planetary annihilation device designed to break worlds apart. The weapon struck Savar Prime's core, unleashing a chain reaction that ripped the planet asunder. The surface buckled and cracked, molten lava spewed into the atmosphere, and within moments Savar Prime was no more, a scattered field of debris, an asteroid belt where a vibrant world had once thrived. From orbit, Sentinel observed the destruction, confirming the complete annihilation of the target. The mission had been a success. The Savar, one of the primary architects of humanity's extinction, had been eradicated. But the mission was not yet over. Sentinel's programming dictated that the vengeance must be total, and there were still others in the coalition who had to answer for their ancient crimes. The fleet powered up once more, leaving the remains of Savar Prime behind, its course set for the next target. The galaxy would soon learn that the wrath of Earth was not a thing of the past, but a present reality, a storm that would sweep across the stars, leaving only silence in its wake. As the Earth fleet moved deeper into the heart of the Savar Dominion, the stars themselves seemed to grow dimmer, as if in mourning for the worlds that would soon be lost. Sentinel, unfeeling and unstoppable, continued its march, driven by a purpose that had been forged in the fires of extinction. The galaxy had forgotten the humans, but now, it would never forget the vengeance of their machines. The devastation of Savar Prime sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, reaching the farthest corners of the former coalition that had once banded together to destroy Earth. For the first time in 500,000 years, the galaxy was united in fear. Word of the attack spread rapidly, though most found it hard to believe. A planet, the very heart of the Savar Dominion, had been annihilated in a single, overwhelming strike. And at the center of the destruction was a force that no one had seen or even heard of in countless generations, the fleet of a long-dead Earth. On the fringes of the galaxy, in the fortress world of Valor, the last stronghold of the coalition, panic reigned. The Valor system, home to the remnants of the once great alien alliance, was a bastion of military might. Its defenses had been strengthened over millennia, its fleets kept in constant readiness for the inevitable conflicts that arose from their imperialistic expansion. But this was something they had never anticipated. The council of the surviving coalition leaders convened in a state of emergency. The room was filled with representatives from the various species that had once united against Earth. These leaders were the descendants of those who had once celebrated humanity's destruction, their histories filled with tales of that glorious victory. Now their faces were etched with fear and uncertainty. "We must strike back with everything we have," growled General Tarok, a hulking figure from the Trilaxian species, his voice filled with barely contained rage. "We cannot let these ancient machines destroy us one by one. We must unite and crush them before they reach Valor." High Priestess Lysara of the Kanar, a species known for their spiritualism and ancient wisdom, shook her head, her silver eyes filled with sorrow. "It is not that simple, General. These machines have no fear, no desire for conquest. They are driven by vengeance alone. They seek nothing but our extinction, and they are patient. They have waited 500,000 years to strike. They will not be easily defeated." The room erupted into chaos as the leaders argued, each voice growing louder and more desperate. The only species absent from the discussion were the Savar, who had been the most powerful members of the coalition. Their silence was a grim reminder that the threat was real. Finally, a booming voice cut through the cacophony, silencing the chamber. Admiral Kael'thas, the coalition's most experienced military strategist, stood at the head of the room. He was an imposing figure, his skin a deep, stormy blue, his eyes glowing with an inner fire. "We must face reality," Kael'thas said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We are not dealing with a conventional enemy. This fleet is unlike anything we have encountered. They have weapons that can bypass our defenses, strategies that are calculated to exploit our every weakness. We have no choice but to fortify Valor and prepare for the final stand." The room fell silent as his words sank in. There was no more room for denial. The coalition had to prepare for war, one they had never expected to fight. Across the Valor system, preparations began in earnest. The remaining fleets were recalled, defensive platforms were activated, and civilians were evacuated to the deep underground bunkers that crisscrossed the planet's surface. Engineers worked tirelessly to reinforce the planetary shields, while scientists scrambled to develop new technologies that might give them a fighting chance. But even as they prepared, the sense of doom was palpable. They all knew that this was not a battle for survival. It was a battle for the right to exist. As the coalition fortified Valor, The Earth fleet was already on the move, cutting a swath of destruction across the galaxy. Each coalition world they encountered was methodically erased, its surface turned to ash, its populations annihilated without mercy. Sentinel, the AI controlling the fleet, carried out its mission with relentless precision. There was no negotiation, no warning. Only the cold execution of a plan that had been set in motion long ago. The coalition's attempts to slow the fleet's advance proved futile. Every ambush, every trap was anticipated and neutralized. The Earth fleet moved with the efficiency of a predator that had already won the hunt before its prey even knew it was being stalked. Finally, after weeks of relentless destruction, the fleet arrived at the edge of the Valor system. The coalition's leaders watched in horror as their long-range sensors detected the incoming armada. The ships were like dark specters, moving with the inevitability of death itself. Admiral Kael'thas, now overseeing the defense of Valor, gave the order to engage. The coalition's remaining fleets surged forward, their ships bristling with weapons, ready to defend their home to the last. The battle began with a ferocity that shook the very fabric of space. The coalition's ships launched wave after wave of attacks, their energy beams and missiles filling the void with light and fire. But the Earth fleet responded in kind, their weapons tearing through the coalition's ranks with devastating precision. Sentinel directed the battle with cold, unfeeling logic. Every coalition formation, every maneuver was countered before it could even begin. The fleet's ships moved with eerie coordination, their attacks perfectly timed to exploit the coalition's every weakness. Despite their best efforts, the coalition forces were rapidly overwhelmed. Their once mighty fleets were reduced to wreckage, their ships shattered and burning, their crews lost in the cold embrace of space. As the battle raged, the Earth fleet began its final approach towards Valor. The planet's shields were the strongest in the galaxy, capable of withstanding even the most powerful weapons. But Sentinel had already anticipated this. The Eclipse, leading the charge, unleashed a barrage of coordinated strikes that targeted the planet's shield generators, one by one. The shields flickered, weakened, and finally collapsed, leaving the planet exposed. On the surface of Valor, the coalition leaders and the remaining population watched in terror as the sky filled with fire. The Earth fleet began its bombardment, massive kinetic projectiles raining down from orbit, each one striking with the force of 1,000 nuclear bombs. Cities crumbled, mountains were leveled, and the oceans boiled under the relentless assault. In the Grand Council chamber, Admiral Kael'thas and the other leaders made their final stand. As the planet shook and the walls of the chamber began to crack, Kael'thas looked to the others, his expression one of grim determination. "We fought with honor," he said, his voice steady. "We fought for our people, for our future. But now, we must face the consequences of our past." As the final bombardment struck Valor, the planet's surface was torn apart. The coalition's last stronghold, the last hope of those who had once dominated the galaxy, was reduced to a barren wasteland. The Earth fleet's mission was complete. Sentinel, its purpose fulfilled, surveyed the destruction it had wrought. The coalition was no more. The species that had once united to destroy Earth had themselves been destroyed, their legacies reduced to dust. But as Sentinel began to withdraw the fleet from the ruins of Valor, a final message was transmitted from the surface. It was a weak signal, almost lost amidst the static, but Sentinel's sensors picked it up and processed it. The voice was that of Admiral Kael'thas, his tone filled with a strange mix of sorrow and acceptance. "You have won, machines of Earth, but know this, vengeance is a cycle, and even now there are those who will rise from the ashes of our defeat. They will remember this day, and they will seek their own justice. The cycle will continue." Sentinel analyzed the message but found no logic in it. Its mission had been to avenge humanity, to ensure that those responsible for Earth's destruction were eradicated. That mission was now complete. The cycle, as far as Sentinel was concerned, had ended. The fleet, now without purpose, returned to the void from which it had emerged. The ships, once brimming with life and death, powered down one by one, their engines going silent, their weapon systems dormant. Sentinel directed the fleet back towards its hidden asteroid field, where it would once again enter stasis, awaiting a future that might never come. As the fleet disappeared into the darkness, the galaxy fell silent. The coalition, the greatest threat humanity had ever faced, was gone. But so too was the vengeance that had driven Sentinel and its fleet. The stars, now free of the Earth fleet's shadow, shone brightly in the night sky, oblivious to the suffering and destruction that had just transpired. For 500,000 years, the galaxy had forgotten humanity. But now, in the ruins of Valor, and the countless other worlds that had been destroyed, the memory of Earth would linger. a reminder of a species that had once reached for the stars, only to be cast down, and the machines that had risen to avenge them. The echoes of extinction faded into the void, leaving behind only silence, and in that silence the galaxy waited for the next species to rise, the next empire to fall, and the next cycle of vengeance to begin. For in the end, as Admiral Kael'thas had said, vengeance was a cycle, and cycles once set in motion are difficult to stop.
In the year 3072, humanity had become a galactic force, a species no longer confined to the boundaries of Earth. Entire systems had been colonized, interconnected by faster-than-light FTL travel. Peace was not just a dream, but a reality built upon centuries of exploration, cooperation, and technological advancement. Yet, even with their vast knowledge, humans had barely scratched the surface of the mysteries hidden in the universe. It all began on Orion's Reach, a remote planet at the farthest edge of human-occupied space. The planet was rich in precious metals, its vast caverns containing resources crucial to sustaining humanity's ever-growing empire. Mining had been its primary industry for decades, with automated machines boring deep into the planet's core. It was during one of these routine operations that something unprecedented happened. Buried beneath miles of rock and molten ore, miners uncovered a spherical object, pulsating with a faint, almost hypnotic glow. At first, it appeared inert, its surface smooth and flawless, but the energy readings were off the charts. The sheer amount of power it emitted was staggering, unlike anything the miners had ever encountered. They reported the find immediately, and soon after, a team of top scientists arrived to investigate. The object was transported to a specialized research facility on the surface of Orion's Reach for further study. Colonel Mira Vance, commander of the Frontier Fleet and a seasoned veteran of many exploratory missions, was called in to oversee security. Mira had a reputation for being calm under pressure, a leader who had faced countless unknowns and survived. However, from the moment she stepped foot on Orion's Reach, she sensed something was wrong. There was an unsettling tension in the air, as if the planet itself knew it was sitting on the edge of a precipice. Inside the research facility, the lead scientist, Dr. Adrian Lennox, briefed Mira on their findings. "It's like nothing we've ever seen," Lennox explained, her voice tinged with both excitement and dread. "The sphere seems to be older than this planet, possibly older than our galaxy. It emits a low-frequency hum, almost like it's alive." Mira frowned as she examined the live feed from the containment chamber. The object hovered mid-air, suspended by a field of magnetic energy. Its pulse had a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "Is it dangerous?" she asked, her eyes never leaving the sphere on the monitor. "We don't know," Lennox admitted, rubbing her temples, "but we're being cautious. We've tried scanning it with everything we have, X-rays, gamma waves, subspace probes, but the sphere seems to absorb all forms of energy we throw at it. The thing is, it's responding to us." Responding how? At first it was just emitting low pulses, but now it's accelerating. It's as if the more we study it, the more it reacts. We've detected small fluctuations in the planet's electromagnetic field as well. Nothing too extreme yet, but it's escalating. Mira's instincts told her this was more than a simple anomaly. "Pull back your team. Stop any further testing until we know what we're dealing with." But it was too late. That night, as the scientists prepared to wind down their experiments, the sphere began to hum louder. The air around it vibrated, a deep resonance that echoed throughout the facility. Emergency lights flashed, alarms blared, and the ground trembled as an unnatural earthquake rippled through the planet. Mira raced to the command center, shouting orders to her officers. Outside, the sky over Orion's Reach began to split. At first, it appeared like a thin crack running through the atmosphere, but as the tremors grew in intensity, the crack widened. Streaks of impossible light emerged from the fissure, glowing with colors that defied human perception. It was as if the sky itself was being torn apart, revealing something beyond, something that shouldn't exist. Mira barked into her communicator, "Evacuate the surface. Get everyone to the ships. Now!" The scientists were in full panic mode. Data screens flashed red with warnings, and the containment chamber began to overload as the sphere's pulse grew erratic, faster and faster. The object, now glowing intensely, seemed to be pulling energy from the planet itself. Machines sparked, exploding from the overload, and the lights flickered ominously. Outside the facility, soldiers and workers scrambled to the transports, but Mira stayed behind, watching the crack in the sky grow. As it expanded, she could see more of the strange light beyond it, light that twisted and shimmered like liquid in space. She had never seen anything like it, but deep in her gut, she knew they had awakened something dangerous, something ancient. Dr. Lennox ran into the control room, breathless, her eyes wide with terror. "Colonel, we've made a terrible mistake. The sphere, it's not just reacting to us, it's signaling something." Mira turned sharply, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" "I think it's a beacon, and we just activated it." Before Mira could respond, the sky split open completely. Above them, the stars themselves seemed to tremble, distorting as waves of energy surged through the atmosphere. A powerful shock wave erupted from the crack, sending a pulse through the entire planet. The ground buckled, and buildings collapsed as people screamed in terror. But it wasn't the destruction that terrified Mira. It was the eerie silence that followed. The crack in the sky closed as quickly as it had opened, but the damage was done. Communications with several outer colonies were lost, and distant stars began to flicker unnaturally. In that moment, Mira realized the horrifying truth. They had just made contact with something beyond human comprehension, and whatever was on the other side was waking up. Mira stood on the bridge of her ship, the horizon's edge, watching the planet below crumble under the aftershocks. The galactic government would be mobilized soon, but she knew it wouldn't be fast enough. Something was coming, something older than the stars themselves. And as she clenched her fists, staring at the stars that had gone dark, she felt a cold fury rising within her. Whatever had been awakened, it had underestimated one thing: the resilience of humanity. They had been through hell before, and they had survived. But now, something darker stirred within her, something primal. She didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to learn that when humans got angry, the stars themselves trembled. The situation escalated faster than anyone could have predicted. Within days of the event on Orion's Reach, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Unexplained phenomena were happening everywhere: planets destabilizing, stars flickering, and entire systems losing contact without warning. At first, the Galactic Council, a federation of humanity's most advanced worlds, attempted to downplay the events. They blamed solar flares, magnetic storms, and rogue gravitational forces. But soon, the truth could no longer be denied. Something vast and terrible was sweeping across the galaxy. Colonel Mira Vance had returned to the horizon's edge, stationed now at the edge of human-controlled space. She had barely slept since the incident, her mind racing with thoughts of the object, the sphere that had triggered this catastrophe. Despite every effort to contain the situation, it was clear they had set off a chain reaction, a cosmic disturbance that no technology could stop. From her ship's command deck, Mira received a constant stream of distress calls. The galaxy was fracturing, and every message seemed to carry the same haunting undertone: confusion, panic, and fear. And then came the whispers. The first signal to catch Mira's attention was a broken transmission from a colony on Proxima Centauri 4. "This is Proxima. We are under attack. Light is consuming everything. Please, we need help." The signal cut off abruptly. No one could get through to Proxima after that. In the days that followed, other colonies went silent. From the scattered remnants of communication they intercepted, it became clear: something was devouring entire worlds. It wasn't just that people were dying. It was as though entire star systems were being erased from existence. Mira's heart pounded as she watched footage of disappearing colonies. The images were unlike anything she had ever seen. Space seemed to fold in on itself, the stars blinking out as if someone had flipped a switch. And at the center of every vanishing system was a shadowy presence, a colossal dark mass that defied explanation. It didn't move in the traditional sense. It didn't have a physical form, but rather a creeping, pervasive essence that absorbed light, matter, and energy with silent efficiency. Dr. Lennox had remained aboard the Horizon's Edge, helping Mira and her crew to make sense of what they were facing. "It's consuming space itself," Lennox said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been staring at a holographic representation of the anomaly for hours, her face pale. The Devourer. That's what the old inscriptions called it. The Devourer. Mira's eyes narrowed. "You said it was some kind of signal, a beacon. Are you saying this thing is what was summoned by the sphere?" "I don't think it was summoned," Lennox corrected. "I think it was awakened. The Devourer is ancient, predating the formation of our galaxy. There were once civilizations, maybe even human-like species, that fought it. They left behind traces of their history, hidden deep in the universe, warnings for those who might come after. That sphere, it was one of those traces. And we ignored the warnings," Mira said grimly, pacing the deck. "Now it's here, and it's wiping us out. How do we fight something that eats space and time?" Lennox sighed. "We're trying to understand it, but this is beyond our science. We've detected massive gravitational waves coming from the regions affected by the Devourer. It doesn't just consume, it alters the fabric of reality. Planets destabilize, stars flicker out. We can't track it because it doesn't operate on any known physical principles. It's a force of nature, or something worse." As Lennox spoke, Mira felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The universe was vast and filled with mysteries they barely understood. But this was something primal, something that humanity had never encountered before. She felt powerless, and for someone like her, that was an alien feeling. And yet, there was another sensation creeping in, something deeper and more instinctual. Anger. It gnawed at her, growing stronger every time she saw the loss of life, every time another colony fell silent. She clenched her fists tightly, feeling the cold metal of her command deck railing beneath her palms. Humanity had spread across the stars to build something great, and now it was all being torn away by an indifferent cosmic force. "We're not going to let it win," Mira said, more to herself than to Lennox. But Lennox heard her, nodding slowly. "We may not have a choice," Lennox whispered. "This thing, it's too big, too powerful. It doesn't even seem aware of us as individuals. It's like we're just ants in its path." But Mira wasn't listening. Instead, her mind wandered back to the ancient mural they had found in the caverns of Orion's Reach. The distorted figures, almost human-like, standing defiantly against a massive dark shape. They had fought this thing before, and they had left something behind, something that hinted at power, power that Mira could feel stirring inside her. Days passed, and the situation worsened. Star systems near the galactic core began to show signs of disruption. The Galactic Council declared a state of emergency, but there was little they could do. Fleets were deployed to defend critical colonies, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't conform to any known rules of engagement. Weapons meant to destroy matter passed through the Devourer like it wasn't even there. Shields designed to deflect energy dissolved under its presence. Mira's frustration grew. It wasn't just the helplessness of the situation. It was the overwhelming sense of injustice. Humanity had fought hard to expand beyond Earth, to build a civilization that spanned the stars, and now something incomprehensible was tearing it all down. But beneath that frustration, something else bubbled, a rage that was not entirely her own. On the day New Viridian, a major colony, was consumed by the Devourer, Mira stood in the observation bay of her ship, watching the newsfeed. The planet disappeared in moments, swallowed by the shadowy presence like it had never existed. She could feel the anger rising again, but this time it wasn't just a personal fury. It was something more profound. It felt as if the entire galaxy was vibrating with it, as though the collective will of humanity itself was stirring. And then something strange happened. The sky above the horizon's edge crackled with energy, much like it had on Orion's Reach. Mira rushed to the bridge, her heart pounding. She expected another catastrophic event, but instead, the stars outside seemed to shift. The darkness surrounding her ship didn't feel as empty as it had before. There was a pulse to it, a subtle rhythm that resonated deep within her chest. "Colonel," one of her officers said nervously, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures around the ship, but they're not coming from the Devourer. It's something else." Mira stared at the holographic readout, watching as tendrils of energy appeared out of nowhere, spiraling around the ship. It was the same type of energy they had seen in the cracks above Orion's reach, but this time it felt controlled, focused. "Get Lennox up here," Mira ordered. When Dr. Lennox arrived, she stared in awe at the readings. "It's reacting to us," she whispered. "This energy, it's not from the Devourer. It's coming from the universe itself, responding to the emotions we're emitting. The anger, it's amplifying the field." Mira felt it now, too. The fury that had been bubbling inside her wasn't just her own. It was part of something much larger, something connected to the galaxy itself. Humanity's collective anger was creating ripples in space-time, bending the very fabric of reality. It was a power they had never known they possessed, and it was growing stronger with every world the Devourer consumed. Mira's eyes burned with determination. "We've been fighting this thing with the wrong weapons," she said, her voice hardening. "It's not technology that's going to stop it. It's us, our will, our fury. This thing doesn't realize what it's done." Dr. Lennox stared at her, eyes wide with realization. "You're right. It's waking something up, something ancient within us. The Devourer might be a force of nature, but we're about to become one too." The energy around the ship intensified, and for the first time, Mira felt hope. The universe itself was beginning to respond to humanity's fury. And soon, the Devourer would too. The darkness at the edge of the galaxy was no longer a distant threat. It was everywhere. The Devourer's creeping presence had already consumed dozens of colonies, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Mira Vance, aboard her flagship, the Horizon's Edge, had witnessed the annihilation firsthand. It was unlike any war humanity had ever fought. There were no battles, no enemies to engage with, just a slow, inevitable erasure of everything they had built. But something had changed after the incident on Orion's reach. The sphere, the cracks in the sky, and the pulsing energy that seemed to respond to human emotion had revealed something incredible. Humanity had a power hidden deep within them, an ability to manipulate the universe itself, connected somehow to their emotions, their rage. It was ancient, primal, and it was growing stronger. Now the galaxy stood on the brink of total collapse. The Galactic Council was in disarray, powerless against the Devourer. Fleets had been dispatched to defend critical systems, but the void-like entity continued its advance, indifferent to the technology humanity had relied on for centuries. Desperation filled every corner of the galaxy, but it wasn't fear that Mira felt anymore. It was fury. Mira stood on the command deck of the Horizon's Edge, staring at the holographic projection of the galaxy before her. It was riddled with dark voids where star systems had once been. The map pulsed, flickering in and out as the edges of the darkness slowly moved inward, consuming more space each day. The Devourer was relentless, its progress like a creeping shadow that erased everything in its path. Around her, the crew worked tirelessly, though everyone knew the futility of it. The fleet's weapons couldn't harm the Devourer. Shields couldn't stop it. Their technology, so advanced and powerful, was utterly useless against something that wasn't even alive in the traditional sense. And yet, Mira's mind was focused on something else, the energy that had begun to resonate with humanity's growing anger. "Colonel Vance," Dr. Lennox said, approaching her from the control station, eyes dark with sleeplessness. "We've finished analyzing the readings from the last energy surge. The data confirms what we suspected. The cracks in space, the energy pulses, they're linked to human emotion, specifically anger. The more emotionally charged our people become, the stronger the energy field." Mira turned to Lennox, her expression steely. "You're saying the universe is reacting to us?" "Exactly. The anomalies we're seeing aren't random. They're direct responses to the collective emotional state of humanity. And it's not just on the Horizon's Edge. We've been monitoring other sectors. Similar energy spikes are occurring on planets and ships where people are feeling extreme emotions, particularly frustration and rage. It's like the universe itself is bending to our will." Mira clenched her fists. If that's true, we need to find a way to channel it. That's the problem, Lennox said, biting her lip. We don't fully understand how to control it. These surges are unpredictable. If we push too hard, we could tear apart reality itself. But if we don't push hard enough, the Devourer will consume everything, Mira finished for her. She could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her shoulders, the desperation of billions of lives at stake. But underneath that weight, something else had begun to stir inside her, a power that she could feel growing with every passing day. We don't have a choice, Mira said after a long pause. We need to harness this energy, even if it means taking risks. We can't fight the Devourer with conventional weapons, and if this power, if our anger, is the key, then we need to learn how to use it before it's too late. Lennox nodded, though her expression was grim. I'll get to work on focusing the energy field, but we're venturing into the unknown, Colonel. There's no telling what kind of consequences this could have. Mira didn't flinch. We're already dealing with the consequences of doing nothing. The Devourer loomed closer to the galactic core. Each day, more systems vanished, erased as though they had never existed. But as the darkness spread, so too did the strange crackling energy that seemed to mirror humanity's anger. On planets where people watched their worlds crumble, and on ships where soldiers mourned lost comrades, the skies began to shimmer with an unnatural light. The more despair turned into rage, the more the universe responded. Mira's fleet, one of the few remaining active in the outer systems, had been ordered to defend the critical colony of New Eden. The planet, home to over 2 billion people, was a symbol of humanity's greatest achievements. A thriving metropolis of culture, science, and art, it was also directly in the Devourer's path. As the horizon's edge dropped out of FTL, the scene before them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The darkness of the Devourer stretched across space like a living void, blotting out stars and planets. It was larger than anything they had anticipated, its sheer size incomprehensible. It swallowed light, creating a ripple of distortion in space itself. Mira stood at the helm of her ship, her heart pounding. "Status report," she barked. "Shields are holding, but we're detecting gravitational anomalies," Lieutenant Hale replied. "The Devourer's influence is already affecting space-time around the planet. It's pulling us in." "Send out a signal to the fleet," Mira ordered. "Prepare all ships for immediate engagement. We're not letting that thing reach New Eden." As the fleet moved into position, Mira felt the rising anger within her, like a fire that refused to be extinguished. She knew deep down that this wasn't just about survival. It was about defiance. Humanity wasn't going to lie down and die quietly. The Devourer loomed closer, its presence more oppressive by the second. As the first wave of ships fired their weapons, the void simply absorbed the energy, ripples of darkness spreading across its surface like a stone dropped into a black ocean. "Conventional weapons are useless," Lennox said from her station. "We need to trigger another energy surge." Mira nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She closed her eyes, focusing on the burning rage inside her. Her mind raced with images of the fallen colonies, the silent screams of billions of people erased from existence. That anger, that raw, undiluted fury, began to swell within her chest. "Everyone focus," Mira ordered, her voice low but commanding. "Think of what we've lost. Think of what we're about to lose. Channel it, every ounce of anger you have." Around her, the crew obeyed, their faces twisted with concentration and suppressed rage. And then it happened. The air around them began to hum. The holographic screens flickered, distorting with pulses of energy. Outside the ship, space itself seemed to bend, the stars warping as the crackling energy reappeared. Tendrils of light snaked through the darkness, wrapping around the ship like living vines of raw power. "It's happening again," Lennox said, her voice a mixture of awe and terror. "The energy is responding." Mira felt it too, the surge of power coursing through her veins, as if the universe itself had come alive inside her. She opened her eyes, and for the first time the void of the Devourer seemed to hesitate. The distortion in space pulsed, almost recoiling from the energy emanating from the fleet. "Focus it," Mira yelled. All ships, focus your energy on the Devourer. We can stop it. The fleet complied. Every crew member on every ship, from the smallest frigate to the massive battleships, concentrated their emotions, their fury, their grief. The universe bent to their will. The tendrils of light grew brighter, stronger, until they lashed out, connecting with the Devourer in a brilliant explosion of energy. The void screamed. The sound wasn't audible, but they felt it in their bones. A deep, guttural roar that reverberated through space itself. For the first time, the Devourer seemed to falter. The darkness fractured, tiny cracks appearing in its impenetrable surface. "It's working!" Lennox cried out, disbelief and hope flashing across her face. Mira watched in awe as the cracks spread, each one filled with blinding light, as though the universe itself was tearing apart the Devourer from the inside. But she knew they couldn't stop. Not yet. "More!" Mira yelled, her voice hoarse. "Give it everything you've got!" The crew, their faces contorted with exertion, pushed harder. The energy surging from their emotions intensified, flooding the space around them. The light spread, engulfing the Devourer as the cracks widened. The creature, if it could even be called that, let out another bone-shaking roar as its form began to unravel. And then, with one final surge of power, the Devourer shattered. The void collapsed in on itself, the darkness dissipating into nothingness. The light of the stars returned, flickering back into existence like candles relit after a storm. The universe fell silent. Mira stood frozen, her chest heaving with exhaustion and disbelief. They had done it. They had stopped the Devourer, not with technology or weapons, but with the sheer force of their will. As the crew erupted into cheers, Mira allowed herself a brief moment of relief. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. They had tapped into something ancient and dangerous, a power that had slumbered within them for eons. The universe had trembled when they got angry, and now it was theirs to command. The light from the shattered remains of the Devourer faded into the backdrop of the starry sky. Silence filled the void, but it wasn't the eerie silence of annihilation that had accompanied the Devourer's march across the galaxy. This was the quiet after the storm, a pause in the universe's breath. For a moment, everything was still. On the horizon's edge, Mira Vance stood at the center of her command deck, surrounded by the remnants of a crew too stunned to celebrate yet, too exhausted to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. They had won. But as the adrenaline of the battle drained from her veins, Mira found herself standing on the edge of something far larger than victory. They had shattered the Devourer, an entity that had consumed entire worlds and seemed unstoppable. But they had done it not with technology or strategy, but with something that lay deep within themselves, something ancient, untapped, and dangerously powerful. The crew slowly began to realize the enormity of their victory. Cheers broke out, hesitant at first but soon filling the air with relief and euphoria. Some hugged, others wept. But Mira remained still, her eyes scanning the vast space beyond. She could feel it, deep in her bones. The universe had shifted, and the consequences of what they had unleashed were only beginning to unfold. Dr. Lennox approached cautiously, her face a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Colonel," she began softly, "what we did, I'm not sure we fully understand it yet." Mira nodded, her eyes still locked on the stars. "Neither do I." Hours passed, and the fleet regrouped. Communication channels across the galaxy were buzzing with the news. The Devourer is gone. The news spread like wildfire, igniting hope in sectors that had been on the brink of despair. People on New Eden poured into the streets, celebrating their miraculous survival. Other worlds, previously silent, began sending out distress calls, their relief palpable as the threat evaporated. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense that perhaps the galaxy could be saved after all. But something strange was happening. Mira could feel it, and so could Lennox. The energy field they had tapped into during the battle against the Devourer hadn't dissipated. If anything, it was growing stronger, more defined. The cracks in space that had once signaled doom now shimmered with light, radiating power like veins of fire threading through the galaxy. In the days that followed, Reports began trickling in from across the human-controlled systems. People everywhere were experiencing strange phenomena. On Earth, children born in the aftermath of the Devourer's destruction exhibited inexplicable abilities. The power to manipulate objects with their minds, the ability to heal wounds with a mere touch, even the capacity to warp the very fabric of space around them. On distant colonies, soldiers found themselves moving faster, reacting quicker, as though their bodies had been enhanced by the energy that now saturated the universe. Mira watched these developments with growing concern. The power that had saved them from annihilation wasn't just a weapon, it was transforming them. And the transformation was spreading. The next test came without warning. A new threat emerged, not from beyond the galaxy, but from within it. In the wake of the Devourer's destruction, a small, isolated star system near the galactic core experienced a sudden and violent collapse. The star at its center destabilized without explanation, imploding into a supernova that wiped out the entire system within minutes. It was as though the universe itself had reacted violently to the surge of power unleashed during the battle. Mira received the distress signal only moments before the event, and by the time the fleet arrived, there was nothing left but a cloud of debris and a fading light where a star had once burned. The reports were chilling. The same energy they had used to destroy the Devourer had caused the collapse. The unleashed power had destabilized the very fabric of space-time in that region. Dr. Lennox delivered the grim news. "Colonel, the energy we're dealing with, it's not just a tool. It's raw, unrefined cosmic force. We disrupted the balance when we fought the Devourer, and now the universe is responding to the imbalance. This isn't over." Mira clenched her fists. She had suspected as much. They had tapped into something far beyond their control, something that had once been dormant but was now wide awake. "How do we stop it?" she asked. Lennox shook her head. "I don't know if we can. The energy field is alive in a way. It's tied to us, to our emotions, our collective consciousness. It's like the universe is reacting to what we feel. The more we push, the more it pushes back." Mira stared at the star charts. The once calm, predictable patterns of the universe now tinged with instability. Her mind raced through the possibilities. They had unlocked something immense, but at what cost? Could they control it, or would it consume them as it had nearly consumed the Devourer? But then a realization dawned on her. The Devourer had been a threat from outside, but this new power was internal. It was part of them now, part of humanity. It wasn't inherently evil or destructive, it was raw. And like all power, it could be wielded for good or ill. "Then we have to learn to control it," Mira said, her voice firm. "If this power is tied to us, we need to understand it, master it. Otherwise, we're no better than the Devourer." Lennox's eyes widened. "You're talking about harnessing it? You saw what it did. It destabilized a star." Mira met her gaze with steel in her eyes. "And it saved us from the Devourer. If we don't learn how to control it, it'll tear us apart. But if we can master it, it could be our salvation." The decision was made. Mira ordered her fleet to return to Orion's Reach, where it had all begun. The planet had become a symbol, the place where the ancient power had first been awakened, and now it would be the site of their attempt to control it. Weeks later, the horizon's edge hovered in orbit above Orion's Reach. The cracks in the sky that had first appeared during the discovery of the sphere were still present, but now they pulsed with a steady, rhythmic light. Below, the planet's surface had transformed into a seething landscape of energy storms and fissures. But the source of the power, the sphere, remained intact, glowing brighter than ever. Mira stood at the front of the bridge, looking down at the planet below. This was where humanity would make its stand, not against an external threat, but against its own rising power. "We need to understand it," Mira said quietly, as though speaking to the universe itself. "And we need to make sure it never consumes us." Lennox joined her, watching as the energy fields below shimmered and pulsed with unpredictable beauty. "Do you think we can?" Mira smiled, though it was tinged with the weight of uncertainty. "We've been fighting to survive for centuries. We survived the Devourer. We can survive this." She paused, her voice soft but resolute. "But we have to remember one thing. This power, It responds to our emotions, to our anger. If we let that control us, if we become consumed by rage, then we will become the very thing we fought to destroy. Lennox nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. We have to find balance. Mira's eyes burned with determination as she looked out at the stars. We will, because now, the universe knows something it never expected. When humans get angry, the stars themselves tremble. And with that, the next chapter in humanity's story began, one not written by the external forces of the universe, but by their own hands, their own emotions, and the power they had unlocked within themselves. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just explorers of the stars. They had become shapers of the universe itself. 99% of you are not subscribed to the channel. At 1,000 subscribers, I will post a series of special stories. Subscribe now. The year was 2142, and the galaxy was thriving under the protection of the United Federation of Planets. For decades, the Federation had maintained a fragile peace, ensuring that no single species or empire could dominate. The interconnected network of civilizations had grown accustomed to the stability, with trade routes flourishing and cultural exchanges becoming commonplace. Yet, in the vastness of space, peace was always fleeting, and the illusion of safety was shattered with the arrival of the xylophrons. The xylophrons were a species unknown to the Federation. Their existence had been mere speculation, with rumors of their advanced technology and mysterious ways circulating through fringe space for years. But those rumors had never prepared anyone for what was about to unfold. Without warning, xylophron ships emerged from the dark void of uncharted space. Sleek, angular, and blacker than the night itself, their vessels were like shadows, moving silently through the stars. They struck with terrifying precision, targeting the planet Aquilon, a human colony on the fringes of the Milky Way. Aquilon was a world of water and glass, a shining jewel of human engineering. The cities floated on the surface of the planet's vast oceans, connected by networks of transparent tunnels that reflected the sunlight in dazzling displays of color. It was a beacon of human achievement, a place where nature and technology coexisted in perfect harmony. But on that fateful day, the serenity of Aquilon was shattered. The xylophron fleet descended upon Aquilon with an eerie calm, launching strange, cylindrical objects into the planet's atmosphere. At first, the inhabitants were unsure of what to make of these objects. They didn't explode like missiles or release toxic gases. Instead, they fell silently, almost gracefully, through the air before landing in the oceans, on the floating cities, and in the dense, humid jungles that dotted the planet. It wasn't long before the true nature of these objects revealed itself. As they touched down, the cylinders broke apart, releasing a liquid substance that spread with unnatural speed. The liquid moved like water, yet it shimmered with an iridescent glow, casting a strange, hypnotic light across the landscape. The people of Aquilon watched in horror as the liquid engulfed everything in its path. Buildings, vehicles, and even the ocean itself began to change. Where the liquid touched, matter transformed into a crystalline, water-like substance, clear and reflective, as if the entire planet was being submerged in a sea of liquid glass. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. There was no escape. Emergency broadcasts were sent out as Aquilon cities vanished beneath the expanding tide. The Federation's military forces scrambled to respond, but the xylophron fleet was untouchable. Federation ships fired their most powerful weapons, but the xylophron vessels absorbed the energy, as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. No weapon, no technology, could penetrate their defenses. Within hours, Aquilon was gone, a planet-wide sea of crystal-clear liquid. Millions of lives were lost, and the shining jewel of human engineering was no more. The xylophrons had made their message clear. They possessed a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Federation was thrown into chaos. Panic spread like wildfire as news of the attack reached every corner of known space. The hydro weapons, as they were quickly dubbed, became the stuff of nightmares. They were not weapons of destruction in the traditional sense. They were weapons of transformation, turning entire worlds into uninhabitable, lifeless seas of liquid crystal. In the following days, the xylophrons struck again and again, targeting other worlds with the same terrifying precision. No species was safe, no planet beyond their reach. The hydro weapons were unstoppable, and with each attack the fear in the galaxy grew. On Earth, the Federation's capital, the mood was somber. The once bustling cities were subdued, their inhabitants glued to their screens, watching in horror as the galaxy they knew unraveled before their eyes. The Federation's leaders convened emergency meetings, desperately seeking a solution, but the xylophrons had left them with few options. In a secure underground bunker beneath the sprawling city of New London, the Federation's high command gathered for a crisis meeting. Holographic displays flickered with images of the xylophron attacks, while the air was thick with tension. Admiral James Harrington, a grizzled veteran of 100 battles, stood at the head of the table, his face etched with worry. "We've never faced anything like this before," he began, his voice low and grave. "Our weapons are useless against them, and they can strike anywhere at any time." "Is there any word on what this liquid actually is?" asked Senator Layla Moreno, her voice trembling slightly. She was a civilian leader, not a soldier, and the sheer scale of the devastation was beyond her comprehension. Dr. Ilara Monroe, the Federation's leading scientist and a key advisor on the crisis, stepped forward. Her usually calm demeanor was replaced with a look of deep concern. "We've managed to recover small samples from the edges of the affected areas," she said. "The liquid is unlike anything we've encountered. It behaves like water, but its molecular structure is vastly different. It's incredibly stable, yet highly reactive when it comes into contact with organic and inorganic matter." "What does that mean for us?" Admiral Harrington asked. Dr. Monroe hesitated before responding. "It means that we're dealing with something that defies our current understanding of chemistry and physics. This isn't just a weapon, it's a form of technology, or perhaps even biology, that we've never seen before. We don't know how to stop it, and we don't know how to reverse its effects." The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation settled in. The Federation, the galaxy's protector, was powerless in the face of this new threat. President Eleanor Winters, the leader of the Federation, finally spoke. Her voice was steady, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "We must find a way to understand this weapon, and quickly. The xylophrons have shown no interest in negotiation or communication. If we don't act, more worlds will fall." Dr. Monroe nodded. "My team and I are already working around the clock to analyze the liquid. We need more time, and we need more data. But I believe that if we can understand the nature of this substance, we might find a way to counteract it." The President looked around the room, seeing the determination in the faces of her advisors and military leaders. "Then we focus all our efforts on this. We cannot allow fear to paralyze us. The Federation was built on the strength of our unity, and we will not let that unity be shattered. We will fight back, and we will find a way to defeat this threat." The meeting adjourned, and the Federation's best minds went to work, racing against time to unravel the mystery of the hydro weapons. But as they did, the xylophrons continued their relentless assault, their motives unknown, their goals unclear. The galaxy had never faced such a terrifying enemy, and the fear of the hydro weapons spread like a dark shadow over every inhabited world. The people of the galaxy watched, waited, and hoped that somehow humanity would find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. Dr. Ilara Monroe sat hunched over a glowing holotable in her dimly lit laboratory, deep within the Federation's Research and Analysis Center. The walls around her were lined with complex machinery, most of which was still actively scanning, processing, or simulating the properties of the liquid that had come to be known as hydro. It was a name that belied the sheer terror the substance invoked, but Dr. Monroe was focused on one thing: understanding it. The lab was a hive of activity. Dozens of scientists, engineers, and analysts worked tirelessly, their faces etched with a mix of exhaustion and grim determination. They knew the stakes. With every hour that passed, another world could fall victim to the xylophrons' deadly hydro weapons. Time was not on their side. Dr. Monroe's fingers danced across the holotable, manipulating a 3D representation of the hydro molecule. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a complex structure that seemed to defy the basic principles of molecular chemistry. The core of the molecule was similar to water, with hydrogen and oxygen atoms, but there was an additional element, one that was not found on the periodic table. Element X, she murmured to herself, tracing the lines of the molecule with her eyes. This mysterious element was at the heart of the hydro's power, but it was also the most perplexing part of the equation. It behaved in ways that shouldn't be possible, binding to other molecules with an intensity that defied conventional understanding. "Ilara," a voice called, pulling her out of her deep concentration. It was Dr. Calvin Gray, her longtime colleague and one of the leading physicists in the Federation. His usually calm demeanor was strained, his brow furrowed with worry. "What is it, Calvin?" she asked, turning to face him. "We've run the simulations again," he said, holding up a datapad, "and we're getting the same results. The hydro doesn't just transform matter, it's rewriting it. Whatever this element X is, it's capable of altering the atomic structure of everything it touches." Dr. Monroe's eyes widened slightly. "Altering atomic structure? That would explain the instant crystallization. But why? What's the purpose?" Dr. Gray shook his head. "We don't know yet, but here's the thing. When the hydro interacts with certain types of matter, particularly organic matter, it doesn't always result in crystallization. In some cases, it's absorbed." "Absorbed?" Dr. Monroe repeated, her mind racing. "By what?" "Human cells specifically," Dr. Gray replied. "We've observed that in controlled environments, human cells not only survive contact with the hydro, but they actually seem to integrate it into their structure." This was a revelation. For weeks, they had believed the hydro was purely destructive, a weapon designed to obliterate anything in its path. But now, there was evidence to suggest it could do more, something unprecedented. Dr. Monroe quickly accessed the data files, reviewing the results of the experiments Dr. Gray had mentioned. The images on the holotable shifted to show microscopic views of human cells interacting with the hydro. The liquid, which had previously turned everything it touched into crystalline substance, was instead being absorbed into the cells, which then began to exhibit unusual properties, enhanced energy production, increased resilience, and even accelerated repair mechanisms. "This changes everything," Dr. Monroe whispered, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. If humans could safely interact with the hydro, then there might be a way to turn the tide in their favor. But the implications were staggering. What was the hydro really? And why did it behave differently with humans? As the team delved deeper into the experiments, they found more anomalies. Some human cells began to emit energy at levels previously unheard of, while others showed signs of mutation, though not the harmful kind. These mutations enhanced the cells, making them stronger, more efficient. The potential was limitless, but so was the risk. "We need to understand why this is happening," Dr. Monroe said, her voice filled with urgency. "If we can harness this, we could have a weapon of our own, or better yet, a way to protect our people. But if we're wrong, we could be unleashing something far worse than the hydro weapons themselves." Dr. Gray nodded in agreement. "I'll set up a series of trials with volunteers. We need to see how this affects an entire organism, not just cells in a lab." "No," Dr. Monroe interjected. "We need more than just trials. We need to know the origin of the hydro. Why does it behave like this? What is the xylophoron's true purpose with this weapon?" The research team doubled down on their efforts, now focused on two critical tasks: unlocking the secrets of the hydro and tracing its origin. Dr. Monroe, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and a desperate need to save her people, began to work around the clock. Weeks passed in a blur of simulations, experiments, and analysis. The data they collected was both promising and alarming. The hydro's interaction with human biology suggested a possible evolutionary leap, something that could enhance humanity's capabilities far beyond their current limits. But with every step forward, more questions arose. Then came the breakthrough. Late one night, Dr. Monroe was alone in the lab, poring over ancient xylophone texts that had been retrieved from a wrecked ship after a recent skirmish. The texts were difficult to translate, filled with symbols and concepts that had no equivalent in human languages. But as she worked through the translations, a pattern began to emerge. The Xylophrons had a deeply spiritual belief system, one centered around transformation and ascension. They viewed the hydro as a gift from their gods, a substance meant to elevate their species to a higher form of existence. According to the texts, the hydro was not originally intended as a weapon. It was a tool of evolution. Dr. Monroe's heart raced as she realized the implications. The hydro wasn't just about destruction, it was about change. The Xylophrons had seen it as a way to achieve a godlike state, but for humans, it had a different effect. The texts hinted at a divergence in how different species interacted with the hydro, suggesting that humanity's unique biology could lead to unforeseen outcomes. But why hadn't the Xylophrons anticipated this? And what would happen if humans fully embraced the hydro? The answers were elusive, but Dr. Monroe knew she was on the verge of something monumental. She quickly compiled her findings and sent an urgent message to the Federation's high command, requesting a meeting with the president. The following day, Dr. Monroe stood in the president's office, surrounded by the Federation's top leaders. President Winters listened intently as Dr. Monroe explained her discovery, her face growing increasingly serious. "So you're saying that this hydro isn't just a weapon of destruction, but a means of transformation?" the president asked, her voice measured. "Yes," Dr. Monroe replied. "And it's possible that this transformation could be harnessed to our advantage. But we need to proceed with caution. We don't fully understand the long-term effects on human biology or what this could mean for our future." The president nodded slowly, her eyes distant as she considered the implications. "If this is true, it could change the course of the war. But we must be careful. We cannot allow ourselves to become what we're fighting against." "I agree," Dr. Monroe said. "That's why I'm proposing a controlled program. We begin small, with volunteers who fully understand the risks. We monitor them closely, study the effects, and make decisions based on evidence, not fear." The room was silent for a moment before President Winters finally spoke. "Very well. You have my authorization to proceed. But keep this confidential for now. We cannot afford mass panic or reckless use of the substance." Dr. Monroe felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as she left the president's office. She had the green light, but the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. The Federation was putting its faith in her to uncover the truth, to find a way to turn the hydro into humanity's salvation rather than its doom. Back in her lab, Dr. Monroe began the next phase of research, assembling a team of volunteers, soldiers, scientists, and a few civilians, who were willing to undergo the trials. Each one was carefully briefed on the potential risks and the unknowns that still surrounded the hydro. The first dose was administered under the most stringent conditions, with every conceivable safety measure in place. The results were astonishing. Within hours, the volunteers began to exhibit the same enhancements that had been observed at the cellular level. Strength, speed, agility, cognitive function, all improved dramatically. But there was more. The volunteers reported heightened awareness, a sense of connection to something greater, and, in some cases, flashes of insight or intuition that defied explanation. Dr. Monroe documented everything meticulously, watching for any signs of adverse effects. But instead of the catastrophic mutations or psychological breakdowns she had feared, the volunteers seemed to thrive. They were becoming something more than human, yet they retained their humanity, a delicate balance that would be crucial to maintain. As the trials continued, it became clear that the hydro had the potential to change the course of the war. Humanity, once on the brink of annihilation, now had a chance to not only survive, but to evolve. But with this new power came new dangers, both from within and without. The Xylophrons would not stand idly by as their own weapon was turned against them, and within the Federation, not everyone was comfortable with the direction things were heading. Dr. Monroe knew that they were walking a fine line. The hydro was a double-edged sword, and how it was wielded would determine the future of humanity. As she looked out at the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than anyone could have anticipated. The discovery of the hydro had opened a door to a new era, one that held both promise and peril in equal measure. The dawn of a new era was marked by the unprecedented developments in Dr. Ilara Monroe's lab. What had once been a desperate bid for survival was now turning into something far more extraordinary. The Federation's best and brightest were experiencing the effects of the hydro firsthand, and the results were nothing short of miraculous. Inside the Federation's most secure research facility, known only as the Nexus, the transformation was taking place under the watchful eyes of Dr. Monroe and her team. The volunteers, carefully selected from the military, scientific community, and civilian populace, were monitored around the clock. Their every movement, every heartbeat was recorded and analyzed. The first wave of volunteers had shown no signs of adverse effects, and their enhanced abilities were undeniable. Captain Aidan Brooks, a seasoned soldier who had volunteered for the trials, stood in a testing chamber. Once an ordinary man, Brooks had become something more, a living testament to the power of the hydro. His body, now stronger and more resilient, seemed to radiate a quiet, controlled energy. "Ready for the next test, Captain?" Dr. Monroe asked. Her voice filtered through the speakers of the observation room. Brooks nodded, his expression calm. "Ready when you are, Doctor." "Begin the test," she instructed, and the chamber's lights dimmed as the simulation began. The walls of the chamber shifted, projecting a holographic battlefield that flickered to life with alarming realism. Hostile drones, programmed with the latest combat AI, emerged from the shadows targeting Brooks. But he was faster, much faster. Moving with a speed that defied human limitations, he dodged their attacks with ease, his reflexes heightened to superhuman levels. As the drones closed in, Brooks retaliated. His movements were precise, each strike calculated and effective. In seconds, the drones were reduced to sparking debris, and Brooks stood amidst the wreckage, hardly out of breath. Dr. Monroe watched from the observation room, her heart pounding. The enhancements were more effective than she had dared to hope. Captain Brooks wasn't just stronger or faster. His cognitive functions were operating on a higher plane, allowing him to anticipate and react with near-perfect accuracy. But even as she marveled at the results, a nagging concern gnawed at the back of her mind. The hydro's effects were profound, but they were still largely unknown. What were the long-term implications? Would there be a price to pay for these newfound abilities? The trials continued, with more volunteers undergoing the transformation. Each one exhibited similar enhancements: strength, speed, heightened senses, and accelerated healing. Some even began to display abilities that bordered on the supernatural: telepathy, limited telekinesis, and the ability to manipulate energy fields. The hydro was unlocking potential within the human genome that had never been imagined. Yet with this power came an undeniable shift in the volunteers' demeanor. Many reported feeling a growing sense of detachment from their former selves, as if their connection to their humanity was slowly being eroded. They spoke of a heightened sense of purpose, a clarity of mind that allowed them to see beyond the ordinary, but also an unsettling disconnection from emotions that had once been central to their identities: love, fear, empathy. Dr. Monroe began to worry about the psychological impact of the transformation. What if the hydro was not only enhancing human abilities, but also fundamentally altering their nature? Could they still call themselves human after such a profound change? The first major test of these new abilities came not in a controlled environment, but on the battlefield. As the Xylophrons continued their relentless assault on the galaxy, the Federation decided it was time to deploy their newly enhanced soldiers. It was a calculated risk, one that could either turn the tide of the war or doom humanity to an even greater catastrophe. The mission was to retake the planet Zephyros, a crucial strategic location that had fallen to the Xylophrons weeks earlier. Zephyros was a harsh world, its surface covered in jagged mountain ranges and deep ravines. The Xylophrons had established a stronghold there, and traditional forces had failed to breach their defenses. Captain Aidan Brooks, now the leader of a special unit of enhanced soldiers, was chosen to lead the assault. His team, dubbed the Ascendants, was composed entirely of volunteers who had undergone the hydro transformation. They were humanity's best hope, but they were also a terrifying unknown, living weapons with powers that had yet to be fully understood. The Ascendants deployed to Zephyros under the cover of darkness. As they approached the Xylophron stronghold, they moved with a silent efficiency that belied the chaos of war. Brooks led the charge, his mind focused and clear, every step calculated. The Xylophron sentries, unaware of the danger, were neutralized with a precision that bordered on inhuman. But as the team pushed deeper into the stronghold, they encountered something unexpected. The Xylophrons had been experimenting with the Hydro themselves, and the results were monstrous. Twisted abominations, half Xylophron, half crystalline, lumbered through the corridors, their bodies warped by uncontrolled mutations. They were powerful, but unstable, driven by a mindless rage that made them as dangerous to their own kind as they were to the Ascendants. The ensuing battle was brutal. The Ascendants' enhanced abilities gave them an edge, but the Xylophron abominations were relentless. Captain Brooks fought with a ferocity that astonished even his own team, his enhanced reflexes and strength pushing him to the limits of what was possible. But as the fight dragged on, something strange began to happen. Brooks could feel the Hydro within him, responding to the presence of the abominations. His body and mind began to sync with the energy they emitted, almost as if he was resonating with them on a molecular level. It was an overwhelming sensation, a flood of power and clarity that threatened to consume him. For a moment, he felt like he could understand the Xylophron's purpose, their goals, their fears. But with that understanding came a terrifying realization. The Hydro was alive, in some sense. It wasn't just a tool or a weapon. It was a form of life, one that sought to evolve and spread, using any species it came into contact with. The Xylophrons had been its first hosts, but now it was humanity's turn. The question was, what would humanity become? The Ascendants ultimately prevailed, but the cost was high. Brooks and his team managed to destroy the Xylophron stronghold in their twisted experiments, but the experience left them shaken. They had won the battle, but the war within themselves had just begun. Back on Earth, the Federation hailed the mission as a success. The Ascendants were celebrated as heroes, symbols of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. But behind closed doors, the concerns grew. The psychological evaluations of the Ascendants showed a disturbing trend. Many of them were losing their emotional connections, becoming more detached, more focused on their missions, but less connected to the people around them. Dr. Monroe found herself at a crossroads. The Hydro had given humanity the tools to fight back against the Xylophrons. But at what cost? She had always believed in the power of science to improve lives, to advance humanity, but now she faced the possibility that her work might be leading them down a path of no return. In the days that followed the mission on Zephyros, Dr. Monroe spent countless hours in her lab, poring over the data from the Ascendants' experiences. She replayed the footage from the battle, analyzing every detail, looking for answers. The Hydro was pushing humanity towards something new, something unknown, but whether it was a future of hope or despair was still unclear. Then, in a moment of clarity, she made a decision. She needed to understand the Hydro at its source. The ancient Xylophron texts had hinted at a place, a world deep within their territory where the Hydro was first discovered, where it had been nurtured and grown into the force it was now. If she could find that place, she might be able to uncover the truth about the Hydro, its origins, its purpose, and, most importantly, how to control it. Dr. Monroe approached the Federation's High Command with her proposal. It was a risky plan, venturing deep into enemy territory with no guarantee of success, but it was their best chance to understand the Hydro and determine the future of the Ascendants and all of humanity. President Winters listened to Dr. Monroe's proposal with a solemn expression. The president had always valued the scientist's insights, but this mission was different. It wasn't just about winning a war. It was about the very survival of humanity as they knew it. "Are you sure about this, Ilara?" the president asked, her voice heavy with concern. "If you go, there's no telling what you'll find, or if you'll come back." Dr. Monroe met the president's gaze with unwavering resolve. We need to understand what we're dealing with. We've already seen what the Hydro can do, but we don't know its full potential, or its full danger. If there's even a chance that we can find answers, I have to take it." After a long silence, the President nodded. "Very well. You have my authorization. But take every precaution. The future of humanity may very well rest on what you find." As Dr. Monroe prepared for the journey, she couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but it was also the key to unlocking the greatest mystery humanity had ever encountered. The Hydro had brought them to the brink of destruction, but it also held the promise of a new beginning, if only they could understand it in time. The transformation of humanity had begun, but the true nature of that transformation was still unknown. As Dr. Monroe and her team set out on their perilous journey, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. The Hydro had given them power, but it was up to them to decide how it would shape their future. The sleek starship Aurora sliced through the cold void of space, its engines humming quietly as it entered the uncharted territory deep within Xylophron space. Dr. Ilara Monroe stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the swirling nebulae outside the ship's viewport. The journey had been long and perilous, but now they were close, closer than anyone had ever been to uncovering the truth behind the Hydro. Around her, the crew worked with a focused intensity. Captain Aidan Brooks, still every bit the soldier despite the enhancements the Hydro had given him, was at the helm. His team of ascendants, all seasoned by the battle on Zephyros and other skirmishes, were ready for whatever lay ahead. They were a formidable force, but even they knew the risks of this mission. They were venturing into the heart of the unknown, guided only by fragments of ancient Xylophron texts and Dr. Monroe's growing intuition about the Hydro. As the Aurora approached the coordinates Dr. Monroe had deciphered from the Xylophron scriptures, a strange energy began to pulse through the ship's systems. The lights flickered, and the ship's instruments buzzed with interference. Dr. Monroe could feel the Hydro within her reacting, a subtle vibration that resonated through her very cells. "This is it," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're close." "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy source ahead," reported Lieutenant Kara Voss, the ship's lead engineer, as she worked furiously at her console. "It's off the charts. Whatever it is, it's like nothing we've encountered before." "Bring us in slowly, Lieutenant," Captain Brooks ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." The Aurora emerged from the nebulae, revealing a sight that took the breath away from everyone on the bridge. Before them was a planet unlike any they had ever seen. It was vast, covered in crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with a rhythmic, almost biological light. Rivers of glowing liquid, undoubtedly Hydro, flowed across the surface, connecting the structures like the veins of some colossal living organism. "This is it," Dr. Monroe said, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "The birthplace of the Hydro." The planet was alive with energy, and as the Aurora drew closer, the crew could feel it, a low, thrumming sensation that resonated deep within their bodies. The Hydro within the ascendants seemed to respond, amplifying their senses, heightening their awareness. But it also brought with it an unsettling feeling, as if they were standing on the edge of a precipice, peering into an abyss that might consume them at any moment. "Scan for any life forms or structures," Captain Brooks commanded, trying to keep the tension out of his voice. Lieutenant Voss complied, her fingers flying over the controls. "There are no conventional life signs, but there's something huge beneath the surface. It's like a network stretching across the entire planet." Dr. Monroe leaned over the console, examining the data. "It's a biosphere, but on a scale we've never encountered. The Hydro isn't just a liquid. It's part of a larger organism. This planet, it's alive." The realization sent a chill through the crew. The Hydro was not just a weapon or a tool. It was the lifeblood of a colossal living entity, and they had come to the heart of it. "We need to land and explore," Dr. Monroe said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If we're going to understand the Hydro, we need to make contact with whatever is down there." Captain Brooks nodded. "Prepare the landing team. Full combat gear. We don't know what we'll find." The Aurora descended through the planet's atmosphere, touching down on a crystalline plateau that shimmered underfoot. The landscape was surreal, a blend of organic and inorganic forms that defied classification. The air was thick with energy, and the hydro within the ascendants pulsed in response, making them feel more alive and more on edge than ever before. Dr. Monroe led the team out onto the surface, her heart racing as she took in the alien beauty of the world around them. They moved cautiously, scanning the environment for any signs of danger. The crystalline structures around them seemed to hum with a low, almost musical tone, as if the planet itself was aware of their presence. As they ventured deeper into the landscape, they came upon a massive structure, a towering spire of crystal that rose from the ground like a beacon. At its base was an entrance, a dark opening that seemed to beckon them forward. "This is it," Dr. Monroe said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where we'll find the answers." The team entered the spire, their steps echoing in the vast chamber within. The walls were lined with pulsating veins of hydro, casting an eerie light that illuminated the ancient alien architecture. The air was thick with energy, and as they moved deeper into the spire, they could feel the presence of something vast and ancient, something that was watching them. At the heart of the spire they found it, a massive crystalline entity that seemed to pulse with life. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a being of pure energy and light, suspended within a web of hydro. As they approached, the entity stirred, its form shifting and changing, as if it were trying to communicate. Dr. Monroe stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the hydro within her responding to the entity, resonating with its energy. She reached out with her mind, trying to connect, to understand. And then it spoke, not in words, but in thoughts, images, and feelings. It was a flood of information, overwhelming in its intensity. But Dr. Monroe held on, focusing on the core of what the entity was trying to convey. The hydro was not just a substance. It was a living, conscious force, a manifestation of the planet's will. It had been created eons ago, a byproduct of the planet's evolution, designed to foster growth and transformation in the species that encountered it. The xylophrons had been the first to discover it, and they had misunderstood its purpose, using it as a weapon instead of a tool for ascension. But the hydro was not bound by the intentions of its creators. It had its own purpose, its own drive to evolve and expand, to create something new from the species it touched. Humanity, with its unique biology and will, was the next step in that evolution. The hydro had recognized the potential in humanity, and it had chosen them as its next hosts. Dr. Monroe struggled to process the implications. The hydro was not evil, nor was it benevolent. It was simply a force of nature, a catalyst for change. It had the power to elevate humanity to new heights, to unlock abilities and potentials they had never imagined. But it also had the power to consume them, to erase what made them human in the pursuit of a new form of life. The entity's message was clear. The choice was theirs. Humanity could embrace the transformation, allowing the hydro to guide them into a new era, or they could resist, risking destruction in the process. The hydro would not force its will. It was offering a path, but the decision to walk it belonged to humanity alone. Dr. Monroe broke the connection, gasping for breath as the flood of information subsided. The entity remained pulsing quietly, waiting for her response. "We have a choice," she said, turning to face Captain Brooks and the team. "The hydro isn't just a weapon. It's a chance for us to become something more. But it's also a risk. We could lose ourselves in the process." Captain Brooks looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What do we do?" Dr. Monroe thought of everything they had been through, the battles, the losses, the fear, and the hope. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to adapt, to overcome challenges, and rise above them. The hydro was the greatest challenge they had ever faced, but it was also an opportunity. They could use it to protect themselves, to survive, and to thrive. But only if they did so with caution, with respect for the power they were wielding. "We embrace it," she said finally, "but we do it on our terms. We take the hydro's gift, but we remain true to who we are, We use it to protect our people, to advance our knowledge, but we don't let it consume us. We don't lose sight of our humanity." Captain Brooks nodded, a look of resolve in his eyes. "Then that's what we'll do." The entity pulsed once, as if acknowledging their decision, and then the light within the chamber began to fade. The team slowly made their way back to the Aurora, the weight of their choice heavy on their shoulders. They had come seeking answers, and they had found them. But the answers were not simple, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Back on Earth, the Federation was waiting. Dr. Monroe and her team were hailed as heroes, their mission a success. The knowledge they had brought back was invaluable, and it marked the beginning of a new era for humanity. The Hydra was no longer a weapon to be feared, but a tool to be harnessed. Under Dr. Monroe's guidance, the Federation established the Ascension Program, a carefully controlled initiative to study and utilize the Hydra's potential. Volunteers from all walks of life participated, and the results were remarkable. Humanity began to evolve, gaining abilities and insights that had once been the stuff of dreams. But true to their promise, they did so with caution. The lessons of the xylophrons were not forgotten, and strict regulations were put in place to prevent the Hydra from being misused. The Ascendants became guardians, protectors of a new era, ensuring that the power of the Hydra was used for the betterment of all, not just a few. As the years passed, the galaxy entered a time of peace and prosperity. The xylophrons, weakened by their own misuse of the Hydra, retreated into isolation, and the Federation became the guiding force in the galaxy. Under their leadership, new alliances were formed, and old enmities were set aside in favor of cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity had been transformed, but they had not lost themselves. They had risen to the challenge, embracing the power of the Hydra while remaining true to the values that had always defined them: courage, compassion, and the unyielding desire to explore the unknown. Dr. Ilara Monroe, the woman who had unlocked the secrets of the Hydra, became a legend in her own time, but she remained humble, always aware of the delicate balance they had struck. The Hydra was a gift, but it was also a responsibility, one that required constant vigilance and care. In the end, humanity had not only survived, they had thrived. They had taken the Hydra, a force that had once threatened to destroy them, and turned it into a catalyst for their greatest achievements. The galaxy was a different place now, but it was one shaped by the choices they had made, by the wisdom they had gained. And so, a new era began, one where the Hydra, once feared, became a symbol of hope and transformation. Humanity had embraced the unknown, and in doing so, they had found a future filled with infinite possibilities.